Hello, everyone. I think it's time for us to get started. So welcome to our webinar, Staying Active During and After Lockdown. Thank you very much for joining us today. It is great to see so many of you joining us today. So my name is Marina Pinheiro, and I'm a physiotherapist and researcher at the Institute for Musculoskeletal Health, and I will chair the session today. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm hosting this meeting from the lands of the Darug people, the traditional custodians of the land, where I'm joining this meeting from today. I pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging, and recognize and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters of New South Wales. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people here today. So today we have a very exciting and busy program today. So there is no question that the COVID-19 restrictions, they have made it more difficult for many of us to stay active. Today, you hear stories of how people stayed active during lockdown, including the challenge they faced, and also some strategies that they found useful to continue to be active. You also hear advice from experts. And as the restrictions start to ease, as of yesterday, for those here in Sydney, we also discuss how to safely resume activities and continue to be active. So we have here our panel of experts, and you can send questions to them in the Q&A window. So you can just type your questions and we'll aim to answer them as we go through. We aim to finish the session today at 11:15 as we had originally planned, but we will stay a bit longer until 11:30 for a live Q&A session for those who are interested and are able to stay. So let's get started. We are now going to watch a short video about getting active with telehealth.
Hi Rita, thanks so much for giving up your time today, talking to everyone.
It's fine, I'm enjoying.
Just if you can give everybody an idea of where you're living at the moment.
I'm in an aged facility in Ashfield.
And how long have you been living there for?
Since the 6th of February last year.
And how are you managing to stay active at this time, especially now that we have COVID and lockdown in Sydney?
I make sure that I always have breakfast and lunch in the dining room, so you go and you having lunch with other people. But I also make sure I walk around in between time, go walking around the facility.
That shows great initiative. Are you attending any group exercise classes at the moment?
Yes, I do group exercises Monday and Thursday, and I do your exercises Monday, Wednesday and Friday.
So you're doing a lot of exercise at the moment, which is great.
Yes, it's really good.
And how does being active benefit you?
I think it benefits me in every way. It benefits your brain because it makes you get out of your chair, move around. And otherwise, if you sit in the chair, even though you're not getting bored because you have so much to do, and I never am bored, but you vegetate. So you need that movement, and you need to see the different parts of the facility, not just your room. Even though my room's lovely, you need to see the different parts.
And you've been starting some telehealth with me. How are you finding it? What's your initial impressions of telehealth?
I love it. I love it. 2 weeks ago I could do 5 sit-stands, and today I did 20. So I felt as though I was flying.
Oh, well, that's a great achievement in 2 weeks. On that positive note, I just want to say thank you for your time, and I'll Zoom you next week.
Thank you, Rick.
Thanks, Rita. Bye.
Bye.
Fantastic. That was very inspiring. It is incredible to see how much progress HITA had made in such a short period of time. I think that was a great way to start this webinar. So now we are going to move to our professional advice session about the benefits of being active. Just a reminder that we have some of the presenters here today. So if you want to ask questions to them, you can type them in the Q&A window in your Zoom screen. So our first presenter is Associate Professor Anne Tiedemann, who will talk about how active all the adults should be.
Hello, I'm Associate Professor Anne Tiedemann from the University of Sydney. And today I'm going to be talking about the World Health Organization Global Guidelines on Physical Activity and Sedentary Behaviour. The guidelines are based on a summary of extensive research evidence and were put together by 30 global leaders around the world. They were released in 2020 and they provide evidence-based recommendations on the amount of physical activity that's important for enhancing health and preventing chronic disease. Before we talk about the specifics of the guidelines, it's important to understand what we mean by physical activity. There are four main domains of physical activity. Firstly, leisure time activity. This includes things like sport, exercise, and other recreational activities. The next domain is domestic activity, and this includes things like household chores, shopping, and gardening. Occupational physical activity includes any activity that's done in the course of employment, and transport-related physical activity mainly includes things like cycling and walking. And all of these types of physical activity are important for contributing to our health and well-being. In terms of the specific recommendations from the guidelines for older adults, first of all, the overall recommendation is that all older adults should take part in regular physical activity. The first specific recommendation is that adults should undertake at least 150 to 300 minutes of moderate intensity aerobic physical activity, or 75 to 150 minutes of vigorous intensity physical activity each week, or a combination of both. Secondly, in addition, on at least 2 days of the week, older adults should take part in muscle strengthening activities at a moderate or greater intensity. And these should include all major muscle groups. And this is to ensure we maintain our ability to keep independent and keep doing the things that we enjoy. Additionally, on at least 3 days of the week, older adults should be taking part in varied multi-component physical activity that emphasises functional balance and strength training at a moderate or greater intensity. And this is really important to maintain functional ability and prevent falls. Overall, the key points from these guidelines are that doing some physical activity is better than doing none. If you're not meeting the recommendations, or if you're not able to at this point in time, doing some physical activity will bring benefits for your health and well-being. It's important to start by doing small amounts and gradually increase the amount and intensity of activity. Be as physically active as your functional ability and fitness allow at this point in time. Now, to conclude, I'd like to play a very short video that was used to launch the WHO guidelines. I really like this video because it clearly captures the overall message of the guidelines that every move counts and that physical activity is really good for everyone, everywhere, every day. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the webinar.
Fantastic. So great presentation and overview of the physical activity guidelines from Anne, and also a great video highlighting that every move counts. So now we're going to move to Dr. Leanne Hassett, who will talk about how active people living with disabilities should be.
Hello, I'm Dr. Leanne Hassett from the University of Sydney, and I'm going to talk about the physical activity guidelines for people living with disability. So the World Health Organization updated their guidelines in 2020, and for the first time they included guidelines for people living with disability. So they recommend that both adults and children who live with disability should undertake regular physical activity if they're able to. In regards to the type and the amount of activity, the recommendations actually match what they recommend for the general population. So for aerobic type of activity, so that activity that makes you huff and puff, they recommend that for adults living with disability, they should do 150 to 300 minutes a week of this type of aerobic activity. If you can work at a higher intensity, so that huffing and puffing but probably not able to talk while you're doing it, then you could probably do a little bit less. And for children, they recommend that you should be active every day and try to fit in at least 60 minutes a day of that moderate to vigorous, so that huffing and puffing type of activity every day. They also recommend trying to do activity that works on strengthening your muscles. So for adults, trying to fit that in twice a week and trying to really involve those major muscle groups. And for children, trying to fit that in 3 times a week. They also talk about this multi-component type of exercise that works on functional balance and strength combined. And so, for example, exercises that might challenge your balance in standing, or functional activities like sit to stand, or even yoga is another example. And they recommend that for older adults living with disability, trying to fit in this type of activity as well 3 times a week. If you're already meeting these levels, and you wanted to do more, then it's likely that it would give you additional benefits. Now, there may be some people there who are nowhere near meeting these guidelines at the moment, and so they might feel a bit daunting. The guidelines do include some good practice points that are still really important. So doing some physical activity is better than doing nothing. So if you're not currently meeting the guidelines and you start doing some physical activity, that's still likely to bring you some benefits to your health. And if you're not currently meeting the guidelines and you start, then it is important not to just dive in and try and meet the guidelines straight away. So it's important to start small and gradually build up how many times you do it a week, how intense you do it, and how long you do the activity for. And when you do these activities, that the evidence would say that there's no major risks in being active, as long as you do it appropriate to your level. And certainly the benefits outweigh these risks for how much benefit there is of being physically active. Again, if you're not used to being physically active, then they also recommend you might want to consult a health professional, so like a physiotherapist or an exercise physiologist, to give you some advice about the type and the amount of activity to start with and to make sure that it suits you and that it's safe. And so they're the guidelines. And so when they've looked at whether people meet the guidelines, for both adults and children living with disability, find that they're twice as likely not to meet these physical activity guidelines at the moment. And so that's why it's really important that we look at strategies to help people to be more active. One way is for health professionals to be talking to people with disability about being physically active, so raising that topic and providing some advice. See your health professional and they don't talk about physical activity, you could raise that topic with them as well and ask for some advice or a referral to someone who would be able to help you. I hope this has been helpful and thank you for your time.
Fantastic. So very clear message from Dr. Leanne on the guidelines for people living with disability. So now let's hear from Professor Julie Biles on being active and independent.
Julie Biles, and I'm one of the directors of the Australian Longitudinal Study on Women's Health. We followed women in their late 40s and another group of women from their early 70s from 1996 through to 2016. If we look at the women who were 70 when we started the study, these women were in the generation where most didn't finish high school, and mostly these women were non-smokers. And at that time, 1 in 5 women participated in at least 20 minutes of vigorous exercise at least once a week. Following those women from age 70, we've been able to calculate that they had a total life expectancy of around 20.4 years, living through well into their 90s, and with 16.3 years of those free of disability. But if the women didn't exercise, they lost around 1 year of life on average and spent more of their remaining life with disability. If you throw in smoking and obesity, the women lost 4.3 years of total life and 4.3 years of life without disability. The total loss of life for the quadruple threat of being less educated, being a smoker, being obese, and not exercising was 5.3 years of total life and 6.7 years of disability-free life. So there's a lot that made a difference to those women's life expectancy and the amount of life that they could expect to live without disability, and exercise was very, very important to do that. If we cast back to the women who were in their 40s when we started, and we try to predict what their life expectancy might be like now they're in their 70s. These women were more educated on average, with most finishing high school. This time, 2 out of 5 women participated in at least 20 minutes of vigorous exercise at least once a week. If they were non-smokers, not obese, and they exercised, we predict that these women can expect to live another 23.7 years from age 70, so into their mid-90s, and most of these years will be free of disability. If they're sedentary and they don't exercise, they can expect to live 1.7 years less, with a greater proportion of their remaining life with disability. So the take-home message from all of this is twofold. One is that if you're 70, you've still got a lot of life to live. And the other is you want to live most of that life with as minimum disability as possible. So getting exercise is a really important part of maintaining your abilities, maintain a healthy weight, and don't smoke. So if you're a smoker, see if you can quit. And even if you have a disability, the really important thing is to maintain the abilities you have, and you don't want to lose the next thing and the next thing, because we know that disabilities go in a hierarchy. So even if you have a disability, maintain the abilities you have. So that's the take-home message. You've got a lot of life to live, and you want to do your best to enjoy it.
Fantastic. So some very compelling evidence for staying active from Professor Julie Biles. Just a reminder that our first 3 speakers, they are here today. So please feel free to send them questions in the Q&A window. So our next presenter is Professor Stephen Fo, a rehabilitation doctor who will give advice on staying active.
My name's Stephen Fo. I'm a Professor of Rehabilitation Medicine at St Vincent's Hospital, Sydney, and at the University of New South Wales. I'm speaking to you today to encourage you to remain active, particularly if you have a disability or you're living with a disability. The reason to remain active is because it improves your overall health, in particular your heart health, your capacity to manage your blood pressure, and it also improves your psychological health, improving calmness and also decreasing sadness. particularly during the period of lockdown for COVID. It is very important for people living with disabilities to stay active. It helps them maintain their weight, it helps them maintain the range of movements in their joints, and it allows them to keep being as mobile as possible. As well as that, it keeps you active and interested, and it engages your mind because you have to make sure you don't fall over and you negotiate things in your environment. And it also helps with mood because we know that exercise improves people's quality of life with respect to anxiety and depression. Sometimes being active, particularly when you have a disability, requires support. You need some advice from other people or even some hands-on help from people around you to get up and start being active and move around. Walking's a great idea, and if you can't walk, pushing a wheelchair or exercising your arms are all really advantageous. Don't be worried if your heart rate increases. That's sort of pretty good. That's what we're trying to do to give your heart a little bit of an exercise itself. Sometimes people with living with disabilities and people with disabilities need access to rehabilitation services. Rehabilitation services are available at most teaching hospitals and at some larger regional and rural hospitals as well. They're also available in the private sector by seeing a physiotherapist or an occupational therapist. Seeing a professional person who's used to working with people living with a disability can also help keep you active. And at the moment, we're providing services like that in metropolitan Sydney and in the country areas, either through face-to-face or even through telehealth or on your phone. Any way you can get the support is really worthwhile. Finally, if you do get COVID and you've survived quite well and you're doing all right, some people will end up having some long-term symptoms. Sometimes it's fatigue, sometimes it's shortness of breath, sometimes it's feeling a bit sad, sometimes it's being worried. And all of these symptoms can be addressed through rehabilitation services that concentrate on what we call long COVID symptoms. Probably the most important thing I'd like to say to you, everyone listening, is please get vaccinated. If you're vaccinated, your chances of going to hospital are much less. Your chance of dying is very, very much less. And we really want people to survive this, do well, and not have to be in hospital, which is really complicated for people living with disabilities. So whatever you do, get vaccinated, ask your carers to get vaccinated, and perhaps be a bit of a leader in the community that you're in and show other people that you've been vaccinated and encourage them to. I look forward to seeing you at the other end of this COVID thing, being fit and active. So good luck.
Some great advice from Professor Stephen there, particularly for people living with disabilities. So now we're going to move and we're going to hear the advice from a geriatrician, Dr. John Ward.
I'm John Ward, I'm a geriatrician, and I just want to tell you why I think exercise is one of the most important strategies for older people. I think that it's almost scandalous that our health system has not built exercise into the treatment programs for almost all conditions that older people experience. If exercise was packaged as a pill, it would be the most prescribed medication in our pharmacopoeia. Exercise helps the brain and the body. It helps prevent diabetes in people who've got impaired glucose tolerance. It helps to minimise the effect of type 2 diabetes. It helps with the management of high blood pressure, with heart disease, with respiratory disease, with people undergoing treatment for cancer. It's a major strategy for the prevention of falls and the prevention of what we call sarcopenia, which is one of the major causes of loss of independence in older age and premature aged care placement. But it's also particularly important in the management and prevention of depression and in the management and prevention of brain deterioration to dementia. At this particular time, with people even more isolated than they normally are, exercise is one of the most important modalities to preserve mental health. I think even without COVID, there's an awful lot of social isolation in the older community, which we know contributes to loneliness and depression. But in COVID times, this is aggravated by the anxiety that COVID induces. And at these times, we need all the assistance we can get to look after our mental health. And daily exercise, I think, is probably one of the most important strategies. It's safe to go out into the community and walk, wearing a mask in case you have to pass somebody on the footpath, but also try and do some resistant exercise with light weights or whatever other options you have, and some balance exercise. And that combination is, say, doing about half an hour, 3/4 of an hour of aerobic balance and resistant exercises is a wonderful way to preserve your mental health in these COVID times. And the other important thing to say, I think, is don't then sit for the rest of the day watching Netflix or reading a book or knitting or doing something else. Every hour, get up and do something, and perhaps a couple other times during the day, do some vigorous walking around the block or even around the garden, and that'll do wonders for your mental health. It'll help you sleep, it'll improve your appetite, and certainly your social relations. The other thing that is happening in these COVID times is people are less inclined to go to their GP and have a regular checkup or even just look after the chronic conditions they've got. And so it's very easy to allow some of these conditions to slip, to allow, say, not as good control of your blood pressure or your lipids or your weight or your diabetes. And exercise is a valuable way to prevent that happening and to avoid looking for perhaps things like night sedatives or anxiety relieving medication that's so easy to do. Exercise, flexibility type exercise is also a good way to avoid those little muscle aches and pains that tend to occur at times when of relative inactivity, which I suspect a lot of people are experiencing at the moment during COVID. The other things that older people need to be doing at the moment is not letting their social relations drift. Pick up the phone a couple of times a day and ring somebody, a friend, family, have Zoom meetings or Skype meetings with your family. Make sure that your social relations are continued. And now we can meet in a park with up to 5 people as long as you're vaccinated. So find a friend and say, let's go and get a coffee and take it down to the park and have a talk. Because keeping up the sort of social relations and also keep up your habits as well, whatever your little hobbies are, whether it's gardening or whether it's knitting or Sudoku or do-it-yourself stuff. Keep those things up. Make sure you keep yourself mentally active and physically active. Don't succumb to the business of just watching Netflix or some other mindless television, which is so seductive.
So another great presentation here today. So an excellent overview on the benefits of physical activity for older people and tips from Dr. John. Last but not least, let's hear from physiotherapist and health coach, Betty Ramsey, on how to get started. So some great tips from Betty on this video.
my name is Betty Ramsey, and I've been working as a physiotherapist for almost 30 years. And in that time, I've seen a lot of people who've had exercises to do. They might have been given them by a physio, they might have been told to be more active by the GP or another doctor. And often people have good intentions, but it doesn't always work out. So it might be starting off and then it fades away. It's kind of like a New Year's resolution. So things can be good in the beginning, but it's hard to keep it up. So what I'm going to go through now is a few questions that you might ask yourself that we're hoping will help you to get the physical activity side of things into your life and keep it going. So a great place to start, and this one is so important, is looking at why. Why are you going to be more active? And what's in it for you? So we know the benefits of physical activity. We know there's lots of benefits for your health, but what about the benefits for you day to day and the benefits for you in the future? And we often talk about this as an investment in your future. Things that you do now will have a big impact on your quality of life now and going forwards. So think about all those things that you would like to do. So some people talk about they would like to be able to keep going out and seeing friends. Being independent and living in the place you're in now is an important one for everyone. Some people talk about they like to keep in touch through hobbies or interests or clubs they might be involved in, or perhaps gardening or travel when things open up. All these things, you need to have a level of physical function that allows you to do it with enjoyment. So really thinking about why. And then the next thing that we'll look at is what will I do? And when we look at what we're going to do, there's lots of options. So we'll give you lots of resources and links to look at exercises you can do at home. You could also look at walking. That's a great form of exercise. So other people choose to go to the gym or a pool or join an exercise group. So if that's not for you, there's lots of things that you can do. And if that is for you, give it a go. If you're not sure, you can experiment and see what suits you best. But starting with a small amount is important. We want you to do something that feels enjoyable and achievable. So not something that makes you feel exhausted and you come home thinking, I'm never going to do that again. So you could set goals. For example, you might say, I want to go for a 10-minute walk 3 times in the week, if that's a challenge for you. If that's too easy or too much, you adjust it accordingly. We know from the research that people who write down their goals are twice as likely to achieve them. So you might get a piece of paper or a journal, write it down and stick it to the fridge, and then you'll be reminded of what to do. So in the beginning, remember that no amount is too small. That's important. Some movement is better than no movement, and no amount is too small to get started. You might also ask yourself, what strengths do I have? So when we talk about strengths, there are different areas. Sometimes people find it hard to work out what their strengths are, but it could be strengths in your mind. So such things as being determined, perhaps being a good organizer, or perhaps being good at planning. If you're not good at any of these, don't worry, there's always a place to start. So it might also be something like a change you've made in the past. So perhaps giving up something that wasn't so good for you, or taking up something that was good for you. Strengths can also be where you can go for a walk. So in your local community, are there nice places you can walk? Also people in your life. Have you got people in your life who would encourage you to be active? So saying it out loud and saying what you intend to do is good. And might also be people who would join you. So those are all things that are strengths that you can draw on when you look at making these changes. Another important thing is what will get in the way. So this one's usually easy for people to answer, and people will tell us such things as there were other things I would rather do than exercise, or perhaps they have pain and it's really important to manage the pain by not doing too much too soon. Other people talk about the weather, it's too hot or cold or too windy or too wet. And it's important to have a backup plan. So a what if plan. So if things don't go ahead the way you thought they would, what can you do instead? So it might be exercising indoors with one of the resources or exercises that we can suggest for you. Or it might be go walking on a different day, Or some people, when things open up, go walking in the shops. If it's wet outside and they have a shopping centre, they could walk in. Another favourite thing we hear from people, or maybe not favourite, but another thing we hear is, I just can't be bothered, or I thought I'll do it later. And I think that procrastination is a very common one. I'll do it later. When you have this, it's important to remember that feeling all day that you should do it, but not doing it is not a good feeling. And often we think, I'll do it later, I should have done it by now. It gets to the end of the day and I might feel too tired. So the great way to get beyond that is just to get out and do it. And remember that you'll feel better after. That's an important thing. You'll feel better physically and you'll feel better mentally because you know you've done it and achieved something. So all those things are great things to remember, to get on and do it. So I will feel better after. If you tell yourself that, that can be a motivator to get out. So the next thing to consider, you might get started and things are going well, but how will I keep this going? There's different methods you can use to help yourself stay on track. And one that people use is to use a calendar and mark out on the calendar when you've gone for a walk or when you've done exercise or been to a group. So you could put W for walk or E for exercise, A for aqua, whatever it happens to be, and you can look back on the month and see how you're going. Other ways are to plan. It's really important to plan what you're doing. Rarely does it just come about that you think, I'll get up and get out now. So planning is good, to look in your diary and block out the times, think I'll go for a walk on these days this week, or I'll do my exercises on these days. And when you're setting the goals of what you will do, it's important to feel confident about the goal that you set. So if it was to go for a walk 3 times a week for 10 minutes, you want to feel at least 7 or 8 out of 10 confident that you could be doing that. So all these questions, why am I doing it? That's really important, really important. And think of yourself in the future. And this one, how do I want my future self to feel? I think that might be it. What do I want my future self to feel like? The things that you can do now will have a big impact. So it's an investment in your future, and you want to look back thinking, I'm so glad I made those changes and became more active because I can see the changes in my life now. So good luck, get started, and think about all those questions to help you keep on track. Thank you.
Wonderful tips from Betty, who has lots of experience on health coaching. So I hope this helped to address some of the questions and motivation that we are getting here on the Q&A session. So this concludes our session on professional advice on staying active. Just a reminder that the webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be emailed to everyone who registered for the webinar once it's available. Also, the complete version of the videos we're watching today will be made available at the Institute, the IMH website, and we'll send you the link with the same email that we send the recording to everyone. So you're going to have access to watch these videos later. It is great to see people interacting, introducing themselves, and also asking questions. So please go ahead and continue to do so. Now we're going to hear stories and tips on how people manage to stay active during lockdown.
At the beginning of COVID, I was fearful. The media was just, everyone was talking about people dying in nursing homes, people living alone were dying. And at 77, despite having a close family, and I'm living alone, and I was absolutely terrified. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know what the future was going to bring, but I knew the only way I was going to get through it was to find a solution for myself.
For me, a big thing is I've missed catching up with friends, going for a body surf early morning. And because of COVID, that was only stopped because even though it's a beach, I could easily attend. I need to have access to warm showers afterwards. because obviously I get so cold, and that was closed off because of COVID. And I attempted to do it once, and it was a disaster. So that would be great. And it's not just the physical activity, it's the meeting up with those friends. So those friends I would see at least twice a week just for that activity, unless somebody organised another social event. So I've been without catching up with those people for nearly 2 years. It's been really hard for someone.
That's why for me, I injured my back many years ago. I noticed it the first probably 2 months at home, because before COVID I used to walk to and from work. So that was 12,000 steps a day without even thinking about it. So as soon as I stopped that, within a month, my back had seized up pretty quickly. So.
Well, no, just basically walking and keeping active, getting up and down and going up the hallway whether I needed to or not. I've got a small hallway over there, standing at the sink and laughing, and I just started to enjoy it. It wasn't an ordeal. I did take the rubbish out, so when I took the rubbish out, I made it enjoyable.
So you thought of all those things as being active and doing what you could to keep moving.
Use it or lose it.
That's it, isn't it? And then what happened once you did start to go out? Where did you go to begin with? How far did you go, or what did you do to get started?
Not far. I did go up. I live not far from the library. I started going to the local library before they closed. But I didn't go far. I would go around the block, but just in the middle of the day with a mask on. And I just made it enjoyable. I thought how lucky I was and how blessed I was, and just kept going on with it.
Look, it's been tough, and probably people that know me well would find that quite surprising for me to actually come and go, oh, it's been tough, because I'm usually very positive. But just looking outside the square. So I've also been limited during lockdown because I've had bilateral upper limb injuries, so I haven't been able to ride my modified bike outside. It's not safe, so I set it up in the lounge room floor. My cleaner's quite aware that she needs to go around it, as well as setting up a bit of a Pilates type studio in my place. So that's made it really good. So I've got a bit of variety, and I haven't had the luxury to even, not that I can go out for a walk, but go out for a roll in my wheelchair because of those upper limb injuries. So doing everything inside has been really important.
Before it dropped to a 5 kilometre zone, I was mountain biking, surfing, walking, just doing a lot of stuff. And once I couldn't get to the beach or couldn't get to Manly Dam, it was a lot more walk around the local area. Also, due to COVID, I picked up tennis, which is quite an addictive sport and something to keep me occupied. So that's been really good over the last 18 months. But because I've been at home for 18 months now from the office, so and I quite often get a bit of back trouble. So keeping walking most days is probably the main thing I try and do, but definitely trying to ride, a couple of times a week and play tennis and just generally just keep active, which is something I've basically done my whole life. So
I've got several ways of staying active. My primary one is I learned, I've got 3 dogs, so I've got to walk 3 dogs a day. So that is a lot of walking. But I also build in just normal walks around my day and getting around, because I learned that being active is quite healthy. And a while ago, I had a bit of a heart scare actually, and I learned and put into my phone that I've set my phone that I have to do 10,000 steps a day, because I read somewhere that 10,000 was a pretty good number. And so I just make sure that during a day I walk 10,000 steps, either with my dogs, or if I haven't done enough, I go and walk around the park.
It's been a bit of a challenge, as we all know, but to keep active has been very important for me. So to keep active, I've actually been playing wheelchair tennis 3 to 4 times a week with friends, but also with the coaches at City Community Tennis. I have also been walking each morning to keep active. I've also been involved in some online physio training sessions through Telehealth. And I've also been involved in recently, because of the easing of restrictions, face-to-face physio appointments and personal training appointments as well.
In terms of training, I'm doing some gym stuff at the moment and some 30-minute runs and some other like block work and so forth. So a bit of building up that base for hopefully another good season.
What we've been doing mainly has been meeting on a weekly basis via Zoom. So we've been able to stay connected and discuss various issues. So whether it be sport related or personal issues in a training squad. The squad members have also been able to tell their teammates what they've been doing. And we've been doing some online sessions with each other as well. So I've been sending out messages each week with session plans, encouraging athletes to train with other squad members in their LGAs and naturally following the New South Wales health guidelines and checking in via text or calls with most of the squad during their week sessions to just see how they're going.
And Matt, what does it look like at your work at the NDIS provider? What sort of activities have been happening there?
Well, actually, we've been very fortunate. So we've been doing some great telehealth sessions with our participants, with our therapist. We've been doing online group fitness classes with modified exercises for those that don't have support workers with the participants to be able to assist, and also encouraging support workers inside their services to go for walks around the block or the park with their participants inside their services to not only assist with fitness, but mental health and overall well-being.
But I've heard of lots of really good examples of where activities have continued during COVID, and I know a lot of people have been doing online activities. My daughter, her dance school has continued to run online. Does require a lot of support from parents though, particularly if the child has a disability, because the parents then really have to be in the room with them while they're doing their session. And I know lots of physios have been running virtual exercise classes, and there's been lots of other online virtual exercise classes available, whether that be through websites or specifically through health or community providers. And I think for kids, the other thing is just really an increase in families being out and about in the community, in their local community. So whereas during school, when there's no COVID restrictions, kids would be doing their activities at school, it's really been up to the parents to be going to the local park. I've noticed a lot more kids out riding bikes. And, you know, for kids with disability, it just often just means that the parents just have to be really a bit more involved at that time. And for a lot of families, that's been able to be achieved through, you know, spending time with the family. For other kids, it's been a little bit more challenging.
Yeah, so I've got a close friend of mine who's got quite severe cerebral palsy. And so she actually got involved in more Pilates in the park. So she was and she used to do a little bit of that pre-COVID, but she was saying to me that doing Pilates in the park with a support worker has been one of the best things that she's discovered. So she's been doing Pilates in the park. I've had a few other friends that can't come to tennis. One has actually taken up bike riding, decided to learn how to ride a bike in their local area. So I think most people that I know are trying to find ways that they can to get out there and enjoy it.
In December 2019, I was awarded a grant for my neighbourhood project. As a physiotherapist and a volunteer, I took on the new initiative, which was not to help people as such, but to create or build a different community. My initial idea of the project was based on physical interaction and connectedness through a range of activities to build a healthy community. The COVID-19 related Sydney lockdowns of 2020 and 2021 have affected my plans, unfortunately, and interfered with social gatherings. So I utilized online content to maintain interaction, distribute information, New South Wales health advice, offer assistance, as well as provide opportunity to share ideas on how we can maintain physical activity in lockdown. The equipment purchased for the exercise and yoga groups
where they were offered and distributed to community members to use at home on a regular basis to stimulate their daily and regular participation in physical activity. And now we exchange video suggestions on various exercises and activities. We post fun photos of ourselves exercising with family members, pets, and I regularly promote Facebook posts from World Health Organization and other health organizations related to the importance of physical activity, especially during COVID-19.
I just did a program for a fundraiser during 1 month, and that was very difficult to have to do it every day. So I would Zoom call friends. So while I was on the bike, I would have the selfie stick and I would be calling them and chatting with them. And it's amazing. You know, they always say training with a friend is always the best way, and even virtually, it's still a great way to train and exercise and keep motivated, I think, because you know, you don't realise when you're having a conversation how much time can fly.
And when you went for your walks, what helped to make it interesting for you? Was there anything that you found helped you?
Well, I started noticing things. And so I had the phone in the back pocket and I started taking photos. One day it'd be a yellow day, one day it'd be tree trunks. And I'd started taking photos of things that just interested me or made me laugh. And I'd come home and set up a montage on my Facebook page. And a few people started enjoying that, and I started to enjoy that as well.
Sort of gave you a purpose for going out other than just going for exercise.
Yeah, because I'd never ever been an exercise person or a physical person. And I felt that the walking, unless I had purpose, it was more enjoyable with a purpose than without the purpose. And I think that's, well, and people I've spoken to, they could see the reason for me doing it, because my era, we didn't go for a walk to get fit or anything. You'd sit in front of the TV and enjoy whatever you were doing.
Nature is my happy place. So I go into the woods, as I call it, the bush as the Aussies call it, and I run along the trails, taking the dog with me, and yeah, that sets me up for the day. There's nothing but benefits to being physically active. I've found I haven't always been physically active. I've only sort of discovered it, I guess, in the last couple of years. But everything about my health is now improved since I have become more active.
Activity obviously is a very good way of controlling weight and keeps the weight down, because controlling weight's not just about input, it's also about output. But the most important, I find, is the mental health that comes with it. By being active and continually moving, you keep a good frame of mind, for want of a better word. But I just find it's very good for my mental stability, if you like. It's also very good, or this last 18 months or however long it's been now, has been a bit trying on the mental health. And if you just stop moving or stop doing things and sit at home, it can get a bit trying on the mind. And so being active is a good way of keeping a good mental health again.
I invested in what are these called?
One of those activity monitors.
An active watch. Yeah. And I noticed that the steps it records your steps, and I noticed that the steps were becoming more so. So then I decided to go further, excuse me. And so the walking picked up and the weight started coming off, and all in all, it was a really good program, really good task that I'd invented.
Right, sure. So doing the exercises at home and getting out walking is making a difference to how you feel.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think such a simple thing, but it's something that it's always been really good for my body, good for my health, but really good for my mental health as well. It's crazy how some days, you know, I'll go for a ride and come back a whole different person. And if I don't ride for a week or two, I definitely notice it actually when I do go out. It's just, I don't know, it's just a freedom for me. getting into team sport, especially in those teenage years, it's great for the mental health and fitness, and gives people with disabilities some good outlets and something to look forward to each week, and to train and strive for excellence in that particular field.
Catching up with other cyclists that I know, and it's always the obligatory coffee afterwards. That's the best thing. And again, somebody that lives on her own, that's really important, just that catch up. And, you know, you talk about everything else but cycling, it's just really chit chat. It's fantastic. So just those simple things I've been looking forward to, and getting back to, again, more connection, real life connection with people, like wheelchair basketball. That's been all cancelled as well. So that would be awesome to get back to, or even the pool. As much as I don't like the pool, it's a bit boring when I've got access to an ocean, but that would be great, because, you know, the physical benefits of just getting in the water, whether you're just standing in it, is just amazing. And
walking has just become part of my life.
So Cherie, thank you very much. It's a great message you've given us there, that it just needs to become a part of your life. So thanks very much for talking to us, Cherie.
Thank you, Betty. It's an absolute pleasure, and I can't recommend it highly. Get off your backside and get out there and go for a walk, everybody. You'll love it.
Fantastic. So some really great tips there from various people. We are very grateful to all these speakers for sharing these stories. So if you feel inspired to get more active after the great presentations we had today, you might be wondering what support is currently available for you. We are getting quite a few questions on how to get started and where to find exercise opportunities. So now Dr. Leanne Hassett will give us a brief overview on where to get more help if you wanted to get started.
Thanks, Marina. Yeah, so there was I saw a lot on the chat of people going, where can we go to find out how to be active? And there are a few websites that will show you that might help you to find where to go and find some different activities, or how to get some support to help you get active. So the first one I wanted to mention was Active and Healthy. And unfortunately, this is only a New South Wales site. But for those of you who are in New South Wales, this is a website that shows a number of different local opportunities for different physical activity, community-based physical activity, and it's particularly targeting people over 50 years old. And so in it, you can put in your local suburb, and you can put in the distance that you'd be willing to travel to do the activity, and it will give you what is available around you. So it might be a yoga class, it might be walking group, or a cycling group, or aqua aerobics, or a gentle exercise group, or lots of different options. So that's a really good website to have a look at. If you're feeling that you're wanting to get started and get active, but you feel that you need a bit of advice, then you can also look for a local exercise professional to help you with that advice. So for example, you can go to Exercise, Sport and Science Australia, to ESSA, and you can look, once again, put in your postcode and find a local accredited exercise physiologist that can help set up a program for you. Similarly, you can go to the Australian Physiotherapy Association and again find a local physiotherapist who can give you some advice how to safely get back into some activity and to help set up a program for you. Now, if you were thinking that I really just need a bit of help to get motivated and perhaps to set some goals, then perhaps health coaching, like a telephone-based health coaching type of service, might be useful. And the state governments across a number of the states in Australia run a free telephone-based service called Get Healthy. So if you look up Get Healthy, you might find that as an option to try out. And finally, if you're someone who is an adult of any age and who does have some walking difficulties at the moment, then here at the Institute for Musculoskeletal Health, we are running a study called the Comeback Trial. And so you could look on our institute website, or you could look up the Comeback Trial to find some information. It provides health coaching by a physiotherapist, including Betty as one of those health coaches, and some text messaging and a range of other interventions that we're looking into. So they're just a few tips, and I'll hand back to Marina. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Leanne. That was great. We're getting quite a few comments here on the chat saying how inspiring the presentations have been, and also some people saying that they have actually used some of the resources that you have just shared, Leanne, so that's great. So now we're going to hear from aged care physiotherapist Rick Dawson. He will introduce to us another great resource on a short video that we're going to play.
Here is our homepage on the Safe Exercise at Home website. We have information for older people, for health professionals. We have success stories from people who have used our website to stay active at home. And we have many resources that you can access to help you stay active at home. All the information in the website can be downloaded in a booklet in English, but we also have a booklet in Portuguese, and we're planning to develop other booklets in other languages to be more accessible to more people. I'm going to take you through to this, one of our safety pages. Here is a copy of a two-page handout that you can print off the website, giving you information how to set up a safe space at home to exercise. All our information can be printable in this format. So this page talks about having a clear space to exercise, removing any obstacles such as trip hazards, reminding you to wear good shoes while you're exercising. If we go back to the home page, our exercise program has been divided into 3 levels. The level 1 is for beginners, people who haven't exercised or are very frail. Level 2 for moderate, and level 3 for people who are more confident and advanced in their exercise programs. But they all share the same sort of information format. Let's have a look at level 1. Level 1 is our foundation level. All our levels have information about which level would suit you. And so a foundation is for those people who are very frail, walk slowly, need a walking aid. But all these 3 levels have information on what exercises to do to stay fit and what exercises you need to do for your level to improve your strength and balance and stay steady on your feet and reduce your falls risk. We have exercise videos that you can follow, such as the one here from an American physiotherapist. But we also have printouts of exercises so that you can remind yourself of what exercises you need to do. So this is a level 1 printout of a couple of exercises. Importantly, I chose this one because it's got sit to stand, which is one of the most important exercises we all need to do, as well as some beginner balance exercise. All our handouts and our exercise sheets have a diary where you record when you've exercised and how many repetitions you've done to help you plan when you want to do it next and how much you want to do. Going back to our homepage, I'd now like to move to our resource page. And on our resource page, we have many more videos and information about giving you opportunities to exercise safely at home. One of my favourite ones is Stay on Your Feet, an organisation from WA. And they've developed lots of videos improving your balance and strength to reduce your falls risks. And they've even created videos on how to get back into bowls, tennis, swimming, golf, and even dance during and after the pandemic. We're very proud of our website, and we recommend that you take your time to explore all the information in the videos and make a decision where you should start. Remembering, if you have any questions about your own individual exercise program, please contact your physiotherapist or your GP for more information. Thank you for the time.
That was an excellent overview from Rick Dawson on the Safe Exercise at Home website. Now we're going to have a short video from Murray Elborn from Disabilities Sports Australia.
Hello, I'm Murray Elborn, CEO of Disability Sports Australia. It's my pleasure to partner with the University of Sydney on this project to be able to get more people with a disability more active more often in Australia and to change lives through sport. Disability Sports Australia offers a wide range of opportunities to be able to get involved in sports. But during the COVID-19 pandemic, it's also really important to be able to service people with disabilities in their homes. We've provided a wide range of opportunities on our website, www.sports.org.au, for you to go and get involved. So all you need to do is go to that website and click the Get Involved tab. And on the website, it'll show you so many different opportunities about things that you can be doing in your home to be able to stay active. And that can be from light exercise and just starting that journey to Zumba in wheelchairs, as an example. We have a wide range of fantastic opportunities for you to have a lot of fun in the home environment and also with your support workers in your home environment. But when we do get out of COVID, it is important to be able to link to your community, to find people to connect with and to have a social inclusion outlet in your community. So we're partnering again with University of Sydney and their partners to be able to introduce the National Referral Hub. And the National Referral Hub is supported by and sponsored by NDSP plan managers. And the whole aim of the Referral Hub is to be able to work with people with disabilities to be more active more often, to be connected into their communities through their support networks, to have a really soft introduction to something that you want to do out in the community. We want you to be more active, we want you to be more confident and get out of the house, get into yoga or personal training or dance or community sport. If you're interested in playing a sport, there's over 100 sports that you can choose from with adaptation and inclusion. In the National Referral Hub, it's really simple. You can work with a physiotherapist, as an example, to be able to go online, fill in a quick 2-minute form, and that comes through to our team at Disability Sports Australia. Our team will then take that referral with your information, contact you the way you want to be contacted, by text, by email, by phone, set that up for you, understand what you want to do in your community, and then facilitate what that meeting is and that first meeting point for you in your community. So we're really excited to be able to work with you to facilitate what you want to do in your community. So talk to your therapist today about being referred to the National Referral Hub. And we look forward to hosting you on our website, where again, you can look at all the different options to stay active in your own home environment. Thanks very much for watching, and we hope to work with you very soon at Disability Sports Australia. Have a fantastic day.
Fantastic. So great overview from Murray. And this concludes our Getting Started session. So a lot of people are asking whether we could make the links of the resources that we are presenting today available. And we will include those links in the email that we're going to send with the recording. So keep an eye for that email that will have the links to the resources, the recording of this webinar, as well links to access the complete versions of the videos that we shared here today. So now I'm going to hand over to Professor Kathy Sherrington, who will make some concluding remarks, and we will also wrap up the webinar.
Thank you very much, Marina. And thanks so much, everyone, for coming along. And thanks to everyone involved in sharing your stories and sharing tips and sharing the evidence. So we're really keen to work together with other organisations to get the message out there more, to really share the benefits of being physically active, particularly for people with disabilities and for older people. And obviously the lockdown has made it very difficult for many people to stay active, and people need help and support to be able to safely restart community activities. And so we believe that organisations need to work together to support older people and those with disabilities to be active. And so this is a statement that we put together, and this statement has now been endorsed by over 20 different organisations. So from research organisations, including our Centre of Research Excellence in Prevention of Falls Injuries, the Australia and New Zealand Falls Prevention Society, the team behind the Safe Exercise at Home website that Rick presented, the Australian Physiotherapy Association, and they're the subgroup of physios interested in physical activity, the Australian Health Promotion Association, the SOS Fracture Alliance, the Australian Association for Physical Activity, the Rehabilitation Medicine Society of Australia and New Zealand, other research institutes, AIMS, NARI and RAIL, and then a number of different community and sporting organisations, including the Older Persons Advocacy Network, the Council on the Ageing, Disability Sports Australia, Brain Injury Australia, Arthritis Australia, the Stroke Foundation, Providers Share and Belgravia Leisure, and Cerebral Palsy Sporting Association of New South Wales, and the International Association, and also the Cerebral Palsy Alliance. So we're really keen to work together to get the message out and really work out ways of better supporting people with disabilities and older people to get the benefits that we've heard about today. We're going to show another short video, which is some tips on getting back into community activity at this time. And all the best. Thank you.
As a coach and in my role working with the NDIS, the return to exercise or sports, I think just needs to be, I think the people need to be mindful that they might not have the fitness levels that they had prior to lockdown. So they need to ease themselves back into sport or exercise. So speaking to a local coach or maybe a personal trainer or a health expert prior to returning with something that I would recommend, slow and steady does sometimes win the race, especially when returning to sport or exercise. You know, some habits that I do try to instill in my participants and my athletes is even if we aren't doing currently sport or exercise, is keeping up good hydration, proper nutrition, and having a good rest. It's not only important if partaking in sport or exercise, but it's also, I believe, great habits to have for general health and well-being.
Going back into sport, pretty much ease into it. Don't go too hard too early, and know your boundaries, and make sure you have that really good base before you progress.
So thank you, Kathy, for sharing this statement. And it is really great to see so many organizations supporting this important initiative. And also we've heard some great tips from Matt and Christian on safely returning to exercise and the importance of pacing ourselves. So for those who are unable to stay for the Q&A session that we have planned to happen now at 11:15, we would like to thank you for joining us today. It's been really great to see so many of you here today and see all the interaction and the questions coming through. We're going to send the email with the links, the recording, as we mentioned before. And for those who are able to stay here, we're going to move to our Q&A session. We got so many questions, so we are now going to have an opportunity to have a live session. So Dr. Juliana Oliveira will moderate this session. So I will hand over to her. Thank you, Juliana.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Juliana Oliveira, a postdoc from the Institute for Musculoskeletal Health. I'll be moderating this 15-minute Q&A session. Before we begin, I would like to introduce our panelists: Associate Professor Anne Tidman, Dr. Leanne Hassett, both from the University of Sydney, Professor Julie Biles, Rick Dawson, physio and aged care physiotherapist and PhD candidate. Also physio and PhD candidate Carrie West, physiotherapist and PhD candidate Emma, and a physio and health coach Betty Hempsey. We got a great content and a lot of interest, and we have already many questions in the chat box. Unfortunately, we will not be able to answer all questions in this live Q&A session, as we have only 15 minutes, but the most frequent asked questions will be posted on our IMH Facebook page. So I'm going to start with one question for probably Julie. We have a question from Jane Moffat. Can you talk a little more about disability hierarchy? So Julie, can you answer this question?
Sure, yes. So thank you. So it's just that when we follow people over time and we assess what they can and can't do, we find that if, say, somebody could walk 500 meters when we first meet them, but maybe that gets a little bit difficult. And then perhaps the next time we assess them, they can't walk 500 meters anymore, then can now only walk 100 meters. And then maybe the next time they can only walk around the house. And maybe the next time they're finding it difficult to get in and out of chairs. And, you know, eventually, usually the last thing that people lose in that, I mean, I'm talking about age-associated disability here, but in that, the last thing people generally lose is the ability to feed themselves. But, you know, they'll lose the ability to cook. They'll lose the ability to just get around the house, to transfer, that sort of thing. So we find that, say somebody can walk 500 meters, even if it's difficult, we want to encourage them to keep walking that 500 meters, because whilst it might be easier for them to reduce that to 100 meters, you're going to lose the ability to walk 500 meters at all, and then the 100 meters will become difficult. So it's sort of the opposite of what we were saying about getting out and exercising. So, so Betty was saying, do a little bit, and then do a little bit more and a little bit more. So I think that's what we mean by the hierarchy. So you could think of the hierarchy of losing it because you haven't used it, or using it so you don't lose it. If you think about it that way. And some people, at times, people won't walk because of pain, but sometimes the pain is because they're not walking. So a common form of pain that older people get because of cardiovascular system is pain in the calves, because of the poorer blood supply to the calf if you've got some peripheral vascular disease. But in fact, perhaps the best way to deal with that is to walk more, you know, maybe taking frequent rests to let the pain settle down, because eventually your blood supply will actually form new pathways around the main vessels. So I think if you can walk through the pain a little bit, not to the point that you're doing yourself damage, but if you can walk through the pain and maintain your abilities, that's important. Otherwise, you're going to lose the next one and the next one and the next one.
Thanks, Julie. We have also a few questions about how to encourage unmotivated people, especially people with chronic pain. So would anyone like to answer this question? I know that Betty talked a little bit about it, but if for people who missed the answers and your presentation, it'd be good to hear again.
Yes, thanks, Juliana. I think it's particularly difficult for people with chronic pain and people with depression as well. So those things separately are very difficult to get started with being active. And those two things together are really particularly difficult. Often it helps to have more support. So we will post the link to the Get Healthy service in New South Wales, where you can have a coach who would talk to you every fortnight. I just would say it's very difficult to do this by yourself. So talk to your GP. If you can access a service, they're very good, and you would talk to someone every 2 weeks who's a health professional and just can help to support you. So that's where I would go.
Awesome. Thanks, Betty. There are a few questions also about the physical activity guidelines, particularly about the exercise intensity. Perhaps Annie or Leanne could talk a little bit more about the importance of moderate and vigorous exercise for the people and people with disability. Can you also talk about the possibility of breaking up the total 150 minutes into small amounts of activity throughout the day? So there were a few questions about it.
Yeah, I'll talk about that, the dosage bit perhaps first. So yeah, there was a question about whether you need to do the bouts of physical activity in 10-minute bouts or not. And the newest compilation of the guidelines and the research says that you don't need to have at least 10-minute bouts. So all activity counts. So every move that you make is providing benefit to your health. Having said that, it is important to try to include some activity each day, if possible, where you do raise your heart rate and you're breathing a little bit harder to get that benefit for your heart and lungs. So yeah, small amounts are fine, and try to do some intense activity that does get you sweating a bit and breathing a bit harder so that you're getting that benefit for your heart and lungs. And Leanne, over to you.
Thanks. Yeah, I guess in regards to the intensity, so yes, so if you can do more intense exercise, you can do it for a shorter period of time and have those benefits. So that might be something that you like. And also, really good for your heart and lungs as well, working at that high intensity. But if that's too hard for you, or if it's not enjoyable for you, then, it is also okay to do it at a light, at a lower intensity, still probably that makes you huff and puff a little bit, but you would still be able to talk while you were walking or doing whatever activity you were doing, and just needing to do it for a longer period of time. So that idea of the sort of 150 to 300 minutes in total over the week. And then you can also look at doing that combination. So doing one or two activities at that more vigorous intensity, and then some other ones at the more moderate level activity. So it's really about working what works for you for the time that you have and what you enjoy doing, and what you feel comfortable with doing.
Thanks, Leanne and Anne. I have here one question, perhaps anyone is welcome to answer this question. How important to get an exercise professional to co-create an exercise program for someone with pain or other disabilities? Anyone can answer this question, or anyone?
Yeah, I could start, Juliana. I was thinking about my answer earlier around getting professional help, and I think it's really important that if you can, you get moving yourself. So if you think, oh, I have to get professional help, that can stop you from doing anything until you get professional help. But when we had Cherie on earlier, she had talked about, she talked with me about getting outside and just walking one house down and then walking two houses down. And I think sitting when you've got pain, being still makes it worse. And with depression, sitting and doing nothing really, it doesn't help. But getting up and moving can shift your energy. If you have depression, getting up and moving can help your pain. So people who sit for a long time, generally their pain gets worse. I've worked with people who've had really quite chronic pain, and once they started to move, they found that it started to improve. So I know it's not simple, and I know it's still very difficult with depression, but there is a sense of achievement when you do something. So starting with really small goals, for the people around that can encourage you, but really having that determination and doing small amounts first. So it might be going outside and walking just for a couple of houses, coming home, or it might be standing up and sitting down 5 times if you can, or 3, whatever you can manage. So there's lots of things you can do without needing to see a health professional. It helps if you can, but there's definitely things you can do, and the resources that we've given have been helpful. And I can see Julie's nodding there, so.
Thank you, Betty. I think Rick wants to also comment on that.
Look, I totally support Betty's comments, and the value that a health professional can do along your journey is look at where your deficits lie and give you some advice on targeted exercise that might give you that added boost. But it's sort of like the icing on the cake. You've got to get moving, you've got to get physically active, and then the health professional can layer that efficiency of exercise to get you the bang for your time, bang for your buck and all that. So, and, you know, it's great to have that person who's got your back as the coach to just support you and encourage you on your journey to stay active and approach wellness.
Thank you, Ricky.
Sorry, Joanna. Just another point. I think for some people it can be restrictive around their finances. So, you know, if there is the possibility of talking to your GP and you can get a care plan through Medicare where you get subsidised 5 allied health treatments per year, and that would be a good way to go if it's difficult for you. So it could be being referred to a physiotherapist, an exercise physiologist. Perhaps a dietitian if that would be helpful. So to see your GP for that could be a good thing to do.
Thank you, Betty. Does anyone want to comment on that question? So we just have 3 more minutes. I think we could, actually, I think before we wrap up the webinar, we would love to hear your key tips on how to stay active. So we can go around, perhaps start with Emma, then Carrie, and then we can followed by Rick, Leanne, and Julie, and finish with Betty. I don't know if you remember all the order, but let's start with Emma and Carrie.
Okay, let me start. Thank you, Juliana. I guess along with other useful advice, I can just say that physical activity is medicine. And having celebrated World Mental Health Day 2 days ago, I think it's important to acknowledge that physical activity definitely reflects on your mental health. So my tip is get active, connect with your community, get physically connected or socially connected these days via telehealth or Zoom, and keep moving because the I guess the effects are numerous and it'll combat many problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Carrie, do you wanna?
Yes, I was just going to add, I think in terms of whether you need a health professional to help you, perhaps thinking about in terms of a support person, if it's not a health professional, trying to find a family member or a friend that can be a support person. And also I think trying to incorporate a lot of this into the everyday activities. So I think one of our speakers earlier who was standing at the sink or putting the bin out, there's so many everyday activities, getting out into the garden, visiting your neighbour, but all those sort of everyday activities can really help to boost just the incidental activity that you can have as well. Doesn't have to be thinking about going to the gym for half an hour or an hour and making it part of your everyday life.
Thank you, Carrie. I don't think I have time for everyone giving key tip. Does anyone want to finish with one? Betty?
Thanks, Juliana. I think my biggest tip is think about why you're doing it. So you're not just doing it for today. You're not just doing it for tomorrow. You're not just doing it because a GP said or a physio said. Think about why you're doing it for your future. So it's an investment in your future. Think about the things you would like to be able to do and keep doing. And I often say to people, your 80-year-old self, if we get there, if you're past there, we'll make it 90, but your 80-year-old self or 90-year-old or 60-year-old will thank you for the changes that you're making now, because those changes you make now are going to really change your quality of life in the future. So do it for yourself.
Thank you, Betty. So this concludes the Q&A session. Thank you to all our speakers for their excellent presentations and discussions. Thank you all for attending. We hope you have learned and enjoyed this webinar. As we said before, the recording session will be sent to those who have registered to the webinar. So thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. We really appreciate everyone's time. So yeah, we wanted the message to reach as many people as possible. So feel free to share the resources widely that we mentioned today. Yeah, stay safe, everyone. Bye-bye.